Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Greg Glenn.
All right, and thanks and welcome here to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, where we're always ready to roll. If you're looking for insights and advice on athlete branding, you're in the right place. In this episode, we're talking about advice for professional and retired athletes, including why Tom Brady didn't retire. Today's guest is Dr. Simon Leclerc, and Dr. Simon Leclerc is a retired lieutenant colonel and comes to us with a wealth of experience here today on the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, a 24-year UK Army veteran. He spent much of his time serving on the front line, leading and working with elite teams, operating in very difficult situations and special operations environments. It's going to be a great episode and chance for us to welcome him in, but also thank you for your service, Doctor.
Greg, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. It's been my privilege and my pleasure to serve.
The first thing, it's in the news right now, obviously, the fact that Tom Brady at age 44 was thinking of retiring and had kind of made that kind of decision. And then, of course, here we are getting ready for free agency, and he's decided to return. And this is kind of a classic scenario, isn't it, Doctor? Where you see an athlete. We've seen a lot of elite athletes, actually. You can think back to Michael Jordan, who retire and then they just can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Tom's obviously a legend in the game, an incredible athlete. And somebody who's probably, if it hadn't been for the Bucks, probably wouldn't have had another chance at proving his ability yet again. And sure enough, he took them to the finals and they won it. So I'm not surprised, I'll be honest, that Tom's come away from the game thinking, well, I need a break, I've done my bit, and then suddenly decided, maybe after a bit of contemplation, that actually he's not quite ready to walk away, because either there's something he felt he hasn't achieved yet, which only he will know, because most of us would look and say, well, you've achieved everything, surely. So either there's some unfinished business for him, or it's his comfort zone and he doesn't really know what else he wants to do next.
Right. And I think
that would be my guess.
Yeah, that must be something you see in a lot of retired athletes. Or the other thing, too, I know you deal with quite a bit, is probably athletes that get injured, right? They have maybe a career-ending injury. Talk to me about some of the things that you do at Player Support Services that could help some of these athletes.
So, yeah, my background is as you said, is military and working in that elite environment. And I've spent my entire career working with people and getting the best out of people from not necessarily their technical skills alone, but also from their personal, their character, and how we can use that to help somebody achieve even greater things. Quite often what I find is that athletes who are injured, who were right on the pinnacle of their career or just about to hit it, suddenly find their careers stopped and they get lost. If you imagine that you've spent your entire life training to do something, to be one of the best in the world at what you do, and then have that taken away from you, then that's a real blow. And psychologically, that's a very difficult place to come back from, because we find athletes lose their identity, they lose their friends, they lose their get up and go and their reason to get up in the morning. And there's this real sense of unfairness. The world's unfair, and why them? So Player Support, what I do and what my team does is we work with these professional elite athletes to help them work out what really makes them tick. So this isn't about stroking their ego. This isn't about taking the same approach that maybe a lot of their advisors would do normally. This is about actually digging into the person and saying, we know what you say makes you tick, but let's actually find out what really makes you tick. because we need to know where you want to go next. And I know an awful lot of people in some very high powered jobs who hate their jobs and still feel underfulfilled. And you're a long time in the wrong career. And if you're forced out of one career into another one unexpectedly, and then that's not the right career for you and you feel unsettled, you're going to be unhappy for a very long time. So at Player Support, we work with athletes who are very skilled and very talented individuals and very driven, to help them turn that into something they want to do. They probably don't even know what they want to do until they come and work with us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's such an important role that you serve. I would love to hear from you growing up. Who was your favorite athlete? What kind of inspired you to get into sports?
I'm very lucky in the sense that I undertook karate at quite a high level. So I was a national junior team member. Although I didn't compete internationally, I was certainly trained with the squad, and then exams and girls came along. So I kind of, that fell by the wayside. So whilst I was enjoying that sport, I was really following Liverpool Football Club. Oh, yeah. Greatest team in the world. If anybody follows soccer, you'll all know who Liverpool is. I can't say enough about them. Other stars that you kind of kept me going in tennis, I really liked. There's kind of people that are slightly disruptive. So Andre Agassi, when he came through, so many people, so many different sports. I followed American football when I was a junior at school. Some of us played it. I can't really say. My role models were many.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, you talked about kind of how the position that you're in today obviously comes from your military background a little bit. How does that help you in your day-to-day work? I mean, I can imagine kind of being able to understand the brain a little bit and the pressure that some of these athletes have faced is something you're able to kind of relate with when they talk about it.
Very much so. I think I can relate on a couple of levels, because initially some people might say, well, hang on a minute, he's a doctor, he's in the army. How was that relatable to a professional athlete? But if you consider that I was probably one of only 6 people in the world that were doing what I was doing, which was going out to the battlefield with a small team, under fire quite often, and treating the victims of the war effectively. So I'd go out 6-8 times a day to various parts of a battle, Afghanistan, Iraq, or other parts of the world. And decisions we were making under fire and under intense pressure, if we got them wrong, people died. And that was the pressure we were used to working under. And when you add the stress of the background and the environment, that adds an additional layer. If you take that to the athletics side, that same sort of concept is professional athletes have spent their entire life getting to that level where they're used to, that pressure, that it's now or never moment. It might just be 30 seconds or a 10-second race every 4 years in a sprint. It might be, the Super Bowl. It might be an NBA final. It could be anything where that pressure is unmatched anywhere else. And, the environment adds to that. The crowd, that adds to your environment, that adds stress in the same way that my environment did. The second part where I think I'm able to connect is that I myself had to come out of the military through injury. So I was, as we said, I was operating at that elite level. I had another 10 years probably in the military to go. And then things started to fall apart. And I was ultimately diagnosed as having severe complex combat-related PTSD. So I was suddenly told, well, actually, you're going to have to leave the military because we can't continue, even if we fix you. And you never really fixed with PTSD, I don't think. Right. But the military's concept was, if we fix you, we're just going to continue to use you in the same area again because you're one of a few people that does that. So realistically, to protect you and protect ourselves, we think you should probably step out of your military career. But similarly, as a pre-hospital trauma doctor, whilst, again, going out to the victims of accidents and crime and all the rest of it all the time, there were triggers there that people were concerned about because, my 2 areas were, I've been under intense danger many times, life-threatening events all around the world. And then I've been exposed to all the trauma and the carnage that's associated with modern warfare. So the second trigger was, well, what happens if you see something that's gruesome? What happens as an ER doc, you see a child that's hit by a car, or, you know, somebody who's shot. So realistically, we think you should step away from that as well. So suddenly I was in this position where I'd spent my entire life training to be one of the best at what I do, and then found that my career had come to an end because of an injury. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. You know, my life came down around me. And it got to a point where I thought, well, I don't even know who I am. I know I'm the doctor, and I'm the officer, and I'm the soldier. But who am I? What really makes me tick? And I was fortunate enough to dig really deep. It took a long time to kind of search into myself and find out what made me tick, to get to the point where I could start to say, well, actually, that's rational. That's not a rational thought. You know, this is my belief about this situation. But actually, when I look back on that, that's only one perspective. That's not the only perspective. And slowly had to kind of recognize within myself what made me who I am, and what I wanted to do in the world. And I'm used to dealing with people in high performance environments, and I'm used to getting the best out of them. So I'm also, fortunately, I'm used to seeing a few of my friends who have killed themselves through PTSD. And we see a lot of professional athletes who struggle when they leave sport doing the same. And younger athletes who get dropped, who get released early on in their careers. And these are very talented people. And I take it personally when my friends have taken this way out because they didn't feel there was any option.
Right.
So I wanted to make a difference. So having used my experience of being in that really dark and low place and how I found my way out of it, I wanted to help other people do that.
How critical is it to have a really good support group or family or, you know, support team behind you when you're going through this time period?
I think it's incredibly critical. I can't think of, you know, you're probably at your most vulnerable at a time like this, where decisions are difficult to make and the wrong decision can be catastrophic. The problem you find with having the right team behind you is the team that are around aren't necessarily ones that have your interests at heart. And it gets to a point where you start to think, okay, am I being paranoid, or, you know, or am I being taken along a route I don't want to go? And again, I see that quite often. I get ex-athletes, you know, professional players who come and say to me, it was kind of suggested and I was moved towards this career, but I don't enjoy it. And I feel unsettled, and I don't know what it is that's making me unsettled, but it's affecting my home life. It's affecting, you know, my social side. It's affecting how I feel about myself. So that kind of all fell into it as well. And then the reason I got involved with sports was, obviously I've always been active, but my daughter's quite a good tennis player in the UK, just as a junior, but all of her coaches are ex-professional players. And getting to know them over the years, quite a lot of them got to know my background and what I was going through. And then when I came through the other side and chatted to them, they said, we wish we'd had someone like you when we were leaving sport. Because it was accepted for a tennis player, when you left tennis professionally, you became a coach. There was nothing else for you to do. It was just what people did. Regardless of what you wanted to do, regardless of what other ambitions you had, the only place you were likely to go was back into tennis coaching. And that sort of spiraled from there, because from then I started talking to soccer players and soccer managers and NFL players, NBA players, hockey players, athletes, Olympic athletes, all around the world, who have all been in that similar position where, you know, I'm very pleased for the athletes that come off the back of their sport and have a career plan and have a life plan. But I'm talking to the people out there that don't have a plan and are in that moment of fear where, you know, I need to do something, but I don't know what it is that I want to do. I think so. I'm kind of coming at it from three different angles, really, but all personal to me, and all of that I think are very relevant to being able to help athletes.
Absolutely. And then when you think about the work that you do, kind of to give people some advice, let's say we have an athlete out there right now that's listening and, says, you know what, this is the exact situation. This is exactly what I'm going through. What is some of the best advice you can give to them right now, or what they should be thinking about, and how to maybe get them out of a bad place and start to have them look on the other side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think quite often it's very difficult because you're in a bad place. You can rationalize that things aren't right, but you can't stop the way you feel. So I think, excuse me, I think the best thing initially is for the athlete to realize that. So it's to put that, have that moment to themselves where, for me, it was my wife said to me, look, you're not the same person. When you come back off tour, it takes a month or more to get my husband back. My daughter's walking on eggshells around me, and all of these clues that I wasn't really picking up on until it got particularly bad. If I'd listened to those sort of signals from other people, or if I'd actually not shut out my own thoughts earlier, I could have put my hand up earlier and asked for help. I think in terms of the teams that support you, it comes down to trust, but it comes down to trusting the people that you trust are going to do it in confidence. They're going to be non-judgmental about your thoughts. I work with athletes who are scared to say what they think. And my whole part is actually just, if this is a one-on-one conversation, you can tell me what you think. I'm not going to judge you. I spent 24 years in the army with soldiers. Do you know what I mean? You can't shock me. And quite often just vocalizing some of their fears and their anxieties is enough to start to, lay them to bed. We start to work on them, change perspective and stuff like that. So recognize it, listen to yourself, listen to others if you feel that something's not quite right. And then look to people who you trust implicitly that don't have an agenda. The only kind of agenda, if you like, is your health and your welfare and your fulfillment, not beyond that. And I think in sport particularly, that's very difficult at times, because a lot of people who are associated with athletes maybe aren't in it for all the right reasons. Right. Some of their team are there for themselves. And we see it with agents sometimes. They'll support an athlete till their career starts to wane and they're gone.
Right.
And this is somebody you might have built a relationship up with 10 years or 20 years. And suddenly that agent walks away from you, as does your coaching team, as does everybody else, because you're no longer seen as that front runner.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's actually one of the reasons why I call myself an athlete brand advisor and not an agent, because I do think sometimes agents get put into that category, like you're mentioning. They're there for the athlete when they need them. They negotiate deals. They help them through their career. And then what happens when their career is over? What happens 5 years after their career is over? Yeah, they're probably still in touch. But as an advisor, I see sport and life in the same picture. And I like to help the athlete during and after their playing career. And that's what I think makes what you and I both do very unique, in the sense that it should go, it can and it should go well past your prime, your sport, and supporting the athlete. Because as I say, once you have an athlete brand, you will always have an athlete brand. And it's how you use that and build your network and grow that then leads to other things in your career that make you successful over the long term.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, we talk about transition coaching, and transition coaching is traditionally a coach who helps an athlete out of sport. But there are multiple transitions through an athlete's career, from amateur to semi-pro, from semi-pro to pro, from pro to elite. There are all these different periods in your professional career where you may struggle with certain challenges, and quite often things will happen around you or for you, but not involve you. And it's important to know who you are, so that you can identify what you do agree with and what you don't necessarily agree with. And maybe you can find an agent that you thought was the right sort of person, but their agenda doesn't align with yours. Their narrative is different. They're going to sell you to the highest bidder It may be the club that you don't want to go to. It might be the team that you've heard really bad things about, but they're working on a commission.
Right.
And ultimately, it's got to be the right fit. And I see this when I was an executive coach. You see that in business. You can have a high flyer in one team, and then you can move them to another team, and they just have a horrendous time. And we see that in athletes all the time. And it's quite often it comes down to culture. It comes down to the fit, the character fit, and you can't put your finger on it if you don't know who you are. Yeah, but there's something not right.
That's interesting you say the word culture, because that's something that I've heard from a lot of coaches. Really, I see a trend over the last probably 2 years where we've got, high school coaches, college coaches, even professional coaches talking about the importance of culture on a team. And I think that that's really important because that leads to success and everybody can buy in. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about having a good team around you. Is when you have a good support team, then everybody's on the same page and you're supporting each other, versus if you have everybody pulling in different directions, as we all know, that doesn't work out well for the greater good. And so I think that culture has become really important to a lot of these teams, because I also think they're starting to realize that it matters when it comes to success as well.
Very much so. I think the difficulty with culture is if you already have an existing culture, trying to change it is extremely difficult, because it comes from the top, and that's fine. But quite often within an organization, there are people who are considered to be the actual influencers, who may not be the bosses. They may be further down. They may be the middle management. They may be, the coaching team, or there may be some personalities. We all know them. We've all been there. There are personalities that say, I've always done it this way and it will be this way. And I coach this way because it's effective. Well, actually, it may be effective for some of your athletes, but it may be having a negative effect on some of your coaching team or your athletes who don't respond best to that kind of coaching. And ultimately, you need a culture that sort of says, right, this is how it's going to be. We're going to feed into this culture, and we're only going to use people that buy into that vision. But the only way to get a culture that works is to have that where everybody feels open, everybody feels honest, everybody can voice things to anybody, so that ultimately everybody feels supported.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I completely agree. And kind of to bring this full circle here, I mean, you look at the culture that was created when Tom Brady went from New England to Tampa Bay, where the culture there had been, we don't win, we've always struggled. And all of a sudden, one person can come in. Now, obviously, there were other people involved, don't get me wrong. But when Tom Brady talks, people listen, and I think that's such an important thing. You can change culture a lot quicker when you have somebody that has such a level of respect when they come in. And I think that's exactly what he did. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about as well, is, culture can only change based on the people that want to change it. And when someone hears from the greatest of all time, you're going to listen.
You are, because they've been there, they've done it, they've got the T-shirt, and they've earned their stripes. Yeah. In a military context, you could argue that probably some of the most senior non-commissioned officers are the people that really have the power and the influence, because they've been in the military longer than anybody else. They've earned that position. Everybody knows how hard it is to get to that position. So everybody listens to them. The officers listen to them because they've been there and done it before. And the officers are probably new to that. And the juniors listen to them because, these guys are legends within the organization. And that's the same with people like Tom Brady.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So I want to finish up with, obviously, people want to get in touch with you. What's the best way that they can reach out and hear from all the work that you do and be able to work with you at Player Support Services?
Yeah, we're a global organization, so it doesn't matter what sport you're from or where you are in the world. We're there to help. As I say, we don't want people to suffer in silence. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Simon Leclerc. You can find us website at www.player-support.com. We're on Instagram, and we are on Twitter. So please feel free just to look us up. But basically, within Player Support, you'll find us.
Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for having me. And as I say, nobody should suffer in silence. Find out for those people that have actually got your back, and you'll just flourish beyond that.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast, because that's how we roll.